There are now 24 cards inside of Merge Tactics, and we're going to be ranking every single one of them. Starting off at dead last, we have the Royal Ghost. Now, the Royal Ghost just completely sucks for multiple reasons. The first is that his traits are not very good. He's undead, which is honestly terrible this season because there's so many more cards to deal with. You have, of course, 7 cards with the Loong. You have now 4 additional buildings with the Battle Machine. And you have so many skeletons you have to account for with the brand new buffed Witch. So the undead is just not going to get as much value. The assassin trait is also not very good because you have a lot of more bulkier cards this season with the giant trait, more tanks like the monk and the electro giant becoming more meta, so you're not going to have as strong of a ranged comp as you would last season. His stats are also pretty mediocre. His ability is honestly not even that good either. He just turns invis for a bit, but that doesn't really have as much impact as it did maybe 2 seasons ago. So the Royal Ghost is honestly just terrible, and I don't think there's any reason to use him in any comp at all. Now up next, this might be surprising, but we actually have the Mini P.E.K.K.A. The Mini P.E.K.K.A. is really only good in the early game, I feel like, but even so, he's not even that good because he has the P.E.K.K.A. trait, which is actually quite decent in the first like 2 rounds maybe. But after that, it's a very shallow trait, you just heal with every hit, so it's not very good, and he also has the Brutalist trait, which is actually a bit underwhelming this season. Yeah, and other than that, his stats are not very good, his HP is low, his damage is not actually too good, it's sort of similar to like the Goblin in terms of DPS, so it's not very good at all. And the Mini P.E.K.K.A. has no place in any meta comps this season, so for that reason, there's really no reason to run the Mini P.E.K.K.A. unless you get him in an early round. The Barbarian has always been one of the weaker troops in Merge Tactics because his stats are pretty mediocre, they're nothing crazy. But his traits are pretty decent this season, which is why he's sort of not in dead last because Clan is always just a very well-rounded trait. That's kind of what carried him. But the Brawler is also not too bad either this season. There's also a Brawler bug now that I'm not really going to try to explain in detail, but for that reason, the Barbarian is not at the dead last, but I wouldn't say he's that valuable to use either. You would mainly just use him in the comps that you have full clan. That's pretty much the only reason you'd ever want to use the Barbarian, just in full clan comps. Next up, we have the Mega Knight. Now, this is actually going to be a very surprising placement for the Mega Knight, I feel like, to most people because he was actually very good in the previous seasons, but there's one reason why I think he fell off so hard in this season, and that is because of the Witch and the Superstar meta right now. He's just completely terrible in those metas because you have the Witch, which spawns infinite skeletons, and because there's just so many skeletons on the board, because his stun doesn't actually do that much damage, it's not going to get very much value as it did in the past. And he just gets completely outstunned by the Superstars. He doesn't do that much damage. His main strong suit was his stun, but now there's just so many other better stun cards to use, like the E-Giant, like the Musketeer, that there's really no reason to use the Mega Knight aside from his traits. Speaking of his traits are actually pretty good. He has the Ace trait, which is good with the Executioner, the Monk. The Brawler trait is always pretty solid. It just adds a bit of bulk to him, so his traits are decent, but in my opinion, there's really no reason to use him over the other stun troops. Next up is the Prince. Now, I think the Prince is actually a bit better this season because they've removed Juggernaut, so now he actually consistently gets value from his ability. But see, I just don't think he's a very good card still, so after you use your initial charge, then what? Like, you just kind of die, right? The Prince just jousts at his first enemy, boom, he stuns them, but then he's just always gonna die. He doesn't really get much value after that. So the Prince is a very hit or miss card. I think he's only that valuable in the early game because if he jousts on a very, like if they have a range unit comp, then that's going to be very good in the early game. Or you can use him on the Monk to maybe get the Monk out of range, maybe prevent his ability from getting as much value. Or you could use him on the Queen now, which is going to be a bit better because the Queen's actually buffed and a bit stronger this season. But yeah, other than that, I just don't think he's very good. Like, there's so many other stun cards, like in the Superstars, that are just going to completely stun him, prevent the value that he got from the last season. There's also a lot more skeletons now, so his Joust isn't going to be as valuable because, okay, sure, you knock back one of the 6 cards on their team, but boom, here comes in 10 skeletons, and what are you going to do about that, right? So Prince is a very hit or miss card. He's good in a few specific scenarios, but other than that, he's just not very useful. Next up is the Bandit. Now, this might be a bit surprising that the Bandit is actually this high in the list, but I think the Bandit's traits are actually pretty decent. I think Ace is going to be a bit better this season because you have the Monk now, so the Ace trait is definitely a bit better, though the Assassin trait is not too good this season in my opinion. However, the reason why I think the Bandit is actually a bit better this season is because there's going to be a lot more buildings in play. So actually the Bandit will get more value per dash because she's going to dash through a lot more extra troops and buildings now with the Battle Machine. And the Bandit is still relatively less contested. If you can get her to like a 3-star for example, or just a very decently high star, her stuns are actually going to get quite a bit of value. So she's actually going to be good at high stars, but just not very good at low stars. So she kind of increases exponentially like that. This might be a pretty hot take, but I actually think the Golden Knight fell off really hard from the last few seasons. The Golden Knight, of course, is very broken when he gets that initial kill and he's able to chain across multiple units. And the reason why the Golden Knight was so good is because after he killed his first unit, which would be 1 out of 6 troops on the other team, he would get his chain of dashes going, and boom, he would dash to the second guy, maybe the third guy, and with one chain of dashes, he could maybe take out half of the enemy team. But in this season, that's going to be so much harder to accomplish because of the Superstar comp, which pretty much counters everything, and especially the Golden Knight, because now you have the skeletons to worry about, and the witch is just going to spawn so many skeletons, an extra, what, 5, 6, 7 skeletons, and the Golden Knight is not going to be able to one-tap each skeleton, so his chain is actually going to be stopped prematurely because he can't one-shot the skeleton, so he's just going to dash to his skeleton, can't one-shot it, and now he's stuck. He's also going to get stunned so much more, so it's going to be so much harder for him to get that first kill, especially from the E-Giant. The Monk is going to take so much more HP. There's so many more bulky cards this season. So for that reason, I think the Golden Knight can be good in certain scenarios if you need an Assassin, if they have a very backline heavy comp, but other than that, I just don't think he's going to get that much value, especially for a 5 elixir troop. Next up, we have the Goblin Machine. Now, the Goblin Machine fell off so hard. He used to be my top 2 card. But he fell off for 2 major reasons. The first is that his missiles do not stun anymore. They just do damage. And that was one of the strongest, if not the strongest part of the machine, because he can continuously stun like the entire enemy team when he had maybe a 3-star or a 2-star level. But now he only does damage, he doesn't even stun, and his missiles don't even do that much damage now. And the second reason is that the Juggernaut trait got removed, so now he has the Brutalist trait instead of the Juggernauts. And the Juggernaut was one of the most broken traits in the game, in my opinion, one of the most fundamental traits you would need for every single comp. But now that he has Brutalist, which is just so much worse, the Goblin Machine is just going to get so much value. Or did I say so much value? I meant so little value. But the only thing that's keeping him afloat is that he has the Goblin trait. And I mean, his missiles kind of do damage, but the biggest reason is that he has a Goblin trait. So if you get him in the early game, of course, you can farm Goblins, farm Elixir. That's probably the biggest thing he has for him. So I wouldn't really use this card unless you're trying to farm Goblins early on. The next card on our ranking is the P.E.K.K.A. Now, I do think the P.E.K.K.A. is slightly worse this season because her traits actually got reworked. Now she has the P.E.K.K.A. trait, which in my opinion is worse than the Ace. The P.E.K.K.A. trait's okay early game, but that's pretty much the only reason you would want to use the P.E.K.K.A. trait in my opinion. The Brawler trait instead of the Avengers, okay. I think they're both sort of similarly leveled. Like, they're both like kind of good, but they're not broken. But yeah, I do think the P.E.K.K.A. is still a pretty solid starting unit, but the reason I think the P.E.K.K.A. kind of dropped this season is because the P.E.K.K.A. in the previous season was able to scale up with more late game comps because of her Ace trait, but now that she has the P.E.K.K.A. trait, she's not going to be as strong in these late game comps. The Skeleton King also fell off for one major reason this season, and that is his traits. The Undead trait is not going to be as good this season in my opinion because you're going to have way more cards to deal with. As I mentioned, you have the additional 4 buildings you have to deal with, potentially 5 if you have a modifier with the Battle Machine. Of course, the Loom was always in the game, 7 troops. And you have the Witch to deal with now, which spawns infinite skeletons. So doesn't matter if you maybe chip down the HP of 4 units if they're going to have like 20 troops with the Witch. Also, the Juggernaut trait got removed, which is one of the best traits in the game, and got replaced with the Brutalist. So the Brutalist trait is such a downgrade from the Juggernaut, so this guy's traits are already inherently much worse. And for that reason, he's not going to be as versatile. You don't want to use him in as many comps as before, whereas in the past, you could run the Skeleton King with pretty much any comp, but now you got to use him for very niche Brutalist comps. So I would really only use him in comps where you want 2 Brutalists, like 4 Clan for instance, but other than that, he's just not going to be as useful as some of these other cards. Okay, you need to hear me out. These Skeleton Dragons are actually decent now, and that is because of one trait alone, the Superstar. See, the problem with these Skeleton Dragons in the past is that, yeah, of course they're going to scale exponentially and be very good when they have multiple units, but the problem is actually getting there. It was so hard to actually get to a point where you'd have multiple Skeleton Dragons on the board. But now that you have the Max Superstar, which has crazy stun and that can stall for so much time now, these Skeleton Dragons actually consistently get enough time to duplicate. Of course, the Monk will tank and deflect anything, just stall for so long. The E-Giant as well will just stun everything. The Musketeer stun, right? The Witch delays with their Skeletons. So now you have so much more time for these Skeleton Dragons to duplicate. And when you get to a point where the Skeleton Dragons duplicate, well, then it's like a mini Skeleton Dragon army on your side, and the Skeleton Dragons get so much value. You guys need to get with the program here. The Skeleton Dragons plus the Witch is such a deadly underrated combo. The Valkyrie is always a pretty consistently decent card because of the Clan trait, as well as her swinging area of effect around her with her melee splash damage. So I think the Valk will always stay at least in the upper half of the cards as long as she keeps this mechanic, as well as the clan trait, but the reason she sort of fell off a lot is, again, the similar reason why a lot of the past juggernauts fell off, which is because of the brutalist trait. She went from having a top 2 trait in the juggernaut trait now to the brutalist trait, which is arguably like a bottom 5 trait. But the reason she's above the other brutalist is because she actually gets a lot more value, because the brutalist marks every time you hit an opponent, but the Valkyrie will actually hit a lot of opponents at once because of her splash damage. And of course, the Valkyrie is just a very good starting hand unit because she has the full clan in the beginning, the clan trait with the heal, and she does a lot of splash damage. She's very tanky, so she's one of the best starting troops. And you could still use her in a lot of late game comps like the full clan. You could use 2 clan as well, 2 brutalist, so she's still a decent card, I would say, but just not nearly as good as she was in the past. Up next, we have the Goblin. Now, the Goblin's always going to be such an amazing card as long as the Goblin trait still exists, because you can get the Goblin in the early game for only 2 elixir, and you can get a free Goblin and a potential merge in the next rounds. So if you get the Goblin in the early game, your economy is basically set up, and the Goblin traits are actually pretty decent. Yeah, his HP is kind of low, but his damage is actually pretty high, so he can still get kills decently in the early game. The only reason I think the Goblin's a bit lower than the Spear Goblin this season is because the Assassin trait is not going to get as much value, in my opinion, in this season. So for that reason, I think he's a decent card in terms of stats, but he's so amazing in terms of his economy advantage that I would definitely always run Goblins if you have the chance. Similarly, the Spear Goblins are also a very top card in my opinion, only 2 elixir. And you get the Goblin trait, which gives you free Goblins, of course. Your economy is good, and his traits and his stats are actually really good as well. And the reason the Spear Goblin is above the Goblin here is because the Blaster trait is actually a bit better this season, in my opinion, because the cards are actually better. You have the Executioner, which is always a decent blaster. The Princess, which is a good blaster now, very good, one of the best cards in the game now, in my opinion. And the Wizard is actually a blaster now, which actually does suit him well. He gets a bit more range and damage. So I think the Spear Goblin is pretty versatile in terms of that you can run him with the other blasters and still get value. And you could always grab him in the early game for that economy boost. Next up, we have the Executioner. Now, the Executioner has always been a very good card, and especially this season, he's very good because his traits actually kind of got a bit better. The traits didn't actually change, but the Ace trait got a bit of a boost in my opinion because of the Monk. And the Blaster trait also is a bit better now because you have the Princess, which is such a strong card, and now the Wizard, which is a very cheap and good card. So he's really versatile. You can pair him with a lot of these other strong Ace, strong Blasters. He has his place in a lot of the top comps, and he's actually a very good individual card. Of course, you have his Pierce and his Boomerang type effect with his attack, which is very useful. You can hit multiple targets at once, and his range is really good. At 9th place, we have the Dark Goblin. Now, the Dark Goblin is the best Goblin, in my opinion, because his stats are pretty good. He has decent HP. His damage is also pretty decent as well, but the main part of his strength is from his Ranger's trait. Of course, in the last few seasons, he was always very good because of the Ranger's trait, but the Ranger's trait did get a bit of a boost, in my opinion, because of the Archer Queen now. So you can still run him with some of the top comps with the Queen and not suffer in the late game. So he's obviously a really good individual card. Once he ramps up his attack with the Ranger, he's going to get so much value, and he's also a good early game card because of his Goblin trait. So I would definitely run the Dark Goblin whenever you have the opportunity. In 8th place, we have the Wizard. Now, the Wizard recently got a trait rework from having Fire to Blaster. Now, the Blaster is actually better than the Fire, in my opinion, because it's way more versatile. You could run it with way more cards. You can run it with 3 other cards instead of just a Baby Dragon with the Fire trait as you would in the last season. And the Blaster actually adds more damage to his attack. So now he does splash damage, and he does more damage, and he heals, and you can use him in clan comps, which are way more versatile now. So the combination of his traits getting a boost from his rework and his damage being upped by the Blaster as well, and his splash damage is also very much more useful this season because, again, you have way more buildings, and people usually clump up their buildings with their troops with the battle machine, so the splash damage is way more useful. He's going to get way more damage, and overall is a much stronger card in this season. The Royal Giant now is actually the best 2 elixir card in my opinion because his traits are super good. You have the Giant trait, which you can unlock for very easily with only just the E-Giant, and the E-Giant, of course, is a very meta troop. So the Royal Giant is used in all the comps where the E-Giant is used, basically. So he's such a versatile and powerful troop when it comes to his synergies. And he also has the Ranger's trait, which is so good, especially now that you have the Dark Goblin and the Archer Queen, 2 of the best individual DPS cards in the game. Well, now you could run him with the Royal Giant very easily as well. He also has over 1,000 HP. Can we talk about this? He's a ranged unit with over 1,000 health. That's almost as much as the Goblin Machine. So this guy is, 1, he has amazing traits. 2, he's very tanky, and 3, he can do so much damage when he ramps up that Ranger trait. and he's such a good early game card as well. He's so good in the early game, so good in the late game, and for that reason, he is the best 2 elixir card on our list. Next up, we have the Princess. Now, I wasn't sure how to feel about her traits getting reworked from Ranger to Blaster, but it has been a huge help. The Princess does splash damage as well, and now she has even more range. She could literally hit the entire board now that she has that +1 range with the Blaster, and she does so much more damage with the Blaster trait as well. And of course, similar logic to the Wizard, the splash damage actually is a lot more effective this season because there's more cards, there's more buildings, and the Princess is actually one of the best counters to the Witch, because she can actually snipe the Witch, and she can do splash damage to the skeletons and the other cards. So for that reason, the Princess is just one of the best cards when it comes to damage alone. Now we are at the top 5 of this list, and number 5, we have the Archer Queen. The Archer Queen recently got reworked from Avenger to Ranger, which has been so helpful in my opinion, because now the Archer Queen already does so much damage, and now she actually charges up and increases her attack speed over time with the Rangers, which is so powerful. And she's able to consistently ramp up her attack because of the clan boosts. So these two traits synergize really well, because now she can just heal when she gets low, so that actually stalls out a bit more time for her to actually ramp up her attack and get the maximum amount of value from her Ranger. So the fact that she can snipe the backline, heal from her HP, and also just ramp up her attack pretty consistently with the Rangers definitely makes her one of the best range cards in the game. At the number 4 spot, we have the Musketeer. Now, the Musketeer is so powerful because of that Superstar trait and her stun. If you have the Superstar trait, you could literally fire multiple stuns and knockbacks in a row, which can prevent their entire team from really doing anything for a good 5 to 10 seconds. The only reason I think the Musketeer is the weakest superstar on the list is because I don't think this is enough to warrant absolute carry potential like the other cards who could potentially like 1v3 or even 1v6 as you're going to see later in the list. But she's such a helpful supplementary unit because these knockbacks can really stall for the rest of your team to get that damage in. Also, one of the things holding the Musketeer back is her traits. I just don't think the Noble trait is very good, and you really don't have any other very meta Noble cards in the current meta. Okay, I just said meta twice, but you literally just don't have any other good Noble cards. That's it. Anyways, at the 3rd place spot, we have the Monk. Now, the Monk is just so powerful. He has the Ace trait, so he can actually heal and do more damage, and he has the Superstar trait, which of course is the best trait in the game. This guy can literally solo an entire team. He just abilities, and he recasts his ability multiple times, and he heals all the damage he gets taken, and he reflects it to the other team, so he can shred the other team slowly by slowly, but he also heals and maintains his HP. Especially at a 3-star level, the Monk can literally solo. He just takes all the damage, reflects it, and the other team slowly just melts away. He's definitely by far the best tank in the game. He could stall so much time for your other team to get their abilities down. At the number 2 spot, we have the Electro Giant. Now, the Electro Giant, of course, is amazing because of his traits. He got recently reworked to have Giant, which is just such a good trait. He gets a bit more tanky, and the Superstar, which is the best trait in the game by far. But of course, the thing that makes this guy absolutely ridiculously broken is the fact that when he recasts his ability, his area of effect somehow grows. I don't even know why they added that to the game. Like, I still think he would have been decent if his area effect didn't grow, but now his area of effect grows, and he could literally can stun the entire enemy team. Even at a 1-star, you can have a 1-star E-Giant that literally stuns all 6, all 7, whatever, all 9 troops on the other team. This ability alone has so much stall potential, and the fact that he can consistently pull it off with the Superstars says enough. And lastly, to no one's surprise, we have the Witch. Now, I've been playing Merge Tactics since they released the game maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and I can confidently say the Witch is by far the most broken, the most stupidly busted card with the most stupidly busted ability you could ever add to the game. In my opinion, if you 3-star every single card, the Witch is at least double the strength of the E-Giant. I could confidently say that and debate with anyone because the Witch, at 3 stars, you spawn a literal skeleton army. Like, there's no other way to put it. If she recasts multiple times, you could spawn so many skeletons on the board. You could fill up the entire arena, take up every single spot with a skeleton, and that makes it impossible to kill her. It literally makes the game into like a 20 or a 30 v6. Because the skeletons actually have decent stats as well. It doesn't mean you could just take them out in one hit. No, it takes quite a few hits and quite a few damage to take them out. So the skeletons are actually good. She can spawn infinite skeletons, and she literally 1v6s. And if you pair her with the E-Giant, well then that is game over. So the Witch is the most broken card in the history of Merge Tactics, and I hope she receives an emergency nerf.